In this video, we are talking about 10 players that you must start in week 9 of fantasy football. But before we get into it, if you can please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you do end up enjoying. Starting at number 10 with Josh Downs, who's having a fantastic season right now as he's the wide receiver 20 in fantasy points per game and has scored the 11th most fantasy points among wide receivers since week 3. And with Joe Flacco taking over as the quarterback 1 for the Colts, the sky is really the limit for Downs as he's averaging 10 targets, 8 receptions, 72 yards, and 19.4 fantasy points per game when Flacco is under center. That is absolutely unreal. Along with seeing impressive usage in 2 full games with Flacco, 25% target share, 31% first read share, 2.14 yards per route run. And on top of that, Downs led all wide receivers in separation score and route win rate in week 8. He's just a really good wide receiver that has a massive opportunity in front of him. And the matchup on Sunday Night Football against the Minnesota Vikings is really about as good as it can possibly get, as Minnesota is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So if you have Josh Downs, if he's been on your bench because of Richardson and then in your starting lineup because of Flacco, you can now start Josh as a wide receiver 2 for the rest of the year because it looks like Flacco is not going to give this job back at this point. So if you have Downs on your team, you can feel really good about this week and going forward. At number 9, Chase Brown has led the Cincinnati backfield in rush attempts since week 4. He is the guy in this backfield, along with seeing 50% or more of the snaps in 3 straight games. And while he hasn't done a ton with those carries as of late, his underlying metrics are still really strong. 7th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 13th in explosive run rate. And Chase has had several big plays, maybe a couple of touchdowns as well, taken off the board due to penalty. Yes, you could say that for just about any player in the league, but it's not like Brown has been absolutely horrible. And it is important to note that Brown is playing a lot better than what the box score, the stat sheet is telling you. And the Bengals are going to be without Zach Moss this week as he popped up on the injury report with a neck injury that does not sound good. So he's going to be out this week. He could be out for a long time. That's good news for Brown. We don't get excited about an injury or wish an injury to happen, but it opens up the door for Chase, who is going to have this backfield to himself, and I think he is set up for a monster game on the ground and through the air because when Zach Moss has been active, he's been stealing away a lot of that pass down work because Cincinnati trusts Moss more in pass protection. But I think with Moss out, Chase Brown is going to get that role as well, and they're also going to be down T. Higgins in the passing game. And the matchup is really nice as the Raiders have allowed the 9th most rushing yards and 10th most fantasy points per game to running back. So I know it's been a little rocky with Brown, but he looks really good. He's on a good offense. He just needs more opportunities, and he's going to get that this week with Moss out in a really nice matchup. So make sure Chase Brown is in your lineup for week 9. At number 8, Darnell Mooney is having a career year with the Falcons. It's been really nice to see. Wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. He already has 4 touchdowns on the season, which ties his career high and leads the NFL in catches of 20 plus yards with 12. So he's been a big play threat on a really good Atlanta offense. We know with Kirk Cousins under center, this team just looks completely different. I think Atlanta scores with ease this Sunday against the Cowboys. Make sure you're starting all your Falcons skill players, whether it's Mooney, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, obviously Bijan Robinson. Get all of them in your lineup. I just think that Atlanta is going to have a field day on offense. And this game also has the highest projected game total at 51.5. So it could be high scoring. Maybe the Cowboys offense surprises us and puts up some points. I'm sure they will with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. But this Dallas secondary has not been very great this year. This whole unit on defense doesn't look the same ever since defensive coordinator Dan Quinn left, now the head coach for the Commanders. And they could be without top corner Trayvon Diggs. So that would be huge news for Mooney, for Drake London. And the Cowboys have allowed the 14th most fantasy points per game to perimeter receivers this season. So maybe this is a spicy take. I mean, Mooney is coming off a strong performance. Yes, he can be a little bit of a boom bust player, but I feel really good about this one. On a good offense, he's been playing really well. Dallas defense has not, but we know the Cowboys can put up points on offense, so it could be high scoring. everything is pointing to another big game for Mooney this week. At number 7, Tyrone Tracy Jr. is playing at an insane level right now and is taking over the RB1 job for the Giants. Devin Singletary has kind of been pushed to the curb, as Tracy has scored 22 plus fantasy points in 2 out of his last 3 games and just ran all over a really good Steelers defense, shredding them for 145 rushing yards, a touchdown, 23 fantasy points, and the Giants have found an absolute gem in Tracy, considering this is only his 2nd year playing the running back position, as he was a wide receiver for most of his time in college. That is absolutely ridiculous and extremely impressive, because Tracy is just going to continue to get better and better as the weeks go on. And he's already been really good. 9th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 10th in explosive run rate. And with Tyrone somehow clearing concussion protocol, I think he's set up for just another monster performance. Like, how can you keep him out of your lineup at this point? He's been too good, and there just isn't a lot of good running backs, I feel like. A lot of consistent running backs that are playing like Tracy is right now. So he is a must start for me. And the Commanders have given up the 8th most rushing yards per game this season. So start Tracy with confidence in week 9. At number 6, DJ Moore. How many times do I have to put Moore on this list before he has one of those big blow up vintage Moore games that we know that he can have? The fact that he's been very average outside of that one big game against his former team, the Carolina Panthers, in week 5, has been really disappointing, and he somehow has been held to fewer than 30 receiving yards in 3 of his last 4 games. I believe that offensive coordinator Shane Waldron deserves a lot of blame for this, but that is something that can be fixed. And I hope the coaching staff is smart enough to find more creative ways to get the ball in DJ's hands, because he's one of the best players, if not the best player that they have on offense. Caleb Williams, rookie quarterback, he's learning. He's getting better. He has to be more consistent, but we've seen flashes. We know what he's capable of. I really think that regardless if he has a big game or not, which I think he's going to, you can't really sit him. You just can't. I know he's been disappointing, but DJ ranks 5th among all wide receivers in red zone target share at 35%, 13th in deep targets, 27.7% first read share, and the matchup is just too good to pass up on, as the Cardinals are allowing the 5th most PPR points per target. So it might be scary. You might not want to do it, but make sure Moore is in your lineup this week, because I think he's going to go off. At number 5, Aaron Jones should bounce back in a huge way in week 9. Since Minnesota's bye in week 6, Jones has seen 95% of Minnesota's running back touches, along with an 84% snap rate. Minnesota doesn't want any other running back on the field but Jones, and I get it. He's also seen a 79% snap rate inside the 10-yard line, so that type of usage, you can't get away from that. And even at the age 29, Aaron has been one of the better backs in football this year, which is kind of surprising, to be honest. Like, an older back, he's had a lot of injuries the last couple of years. He was an obvious fade in fantasy drafts this season, and that was absolutely wrong, as he ranks 4th in yards after contact per attempt, 11th in explosive run rate, and gets a juicy matchup against the poor Indianapolis run defense that ranks 30th in total rushing yards allowed. And they've also given up 17 plus fantasy points to running backs in 3 of their last 4 games. So it's been kind of the theme this year, like older running backs proving that they still got it. Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Aaron Jones, just to name a couple. But yeah, even a bad game last week for Jones, it doesn't matter. His usage is phenomenal. He's on a really good Minnesota offense, and the matchup is really good as well. Like, he could have one of those 25, 30 fantasy point outputs. So make sure he's in your lineup on Sunday Night Football. He is going to maybe win you your week. At number 4, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been all over the map this year. He's had really good games, really bad games. What we need to learn from this is you can just never bench Marvin, even if he's riding a cold streak or has a tough matchup, because he's a player that can just go crazy at any moment, as he put together a huge performance against a stingy Dolphins secondary, Jalen Ramsey. It didn't matter. 6 catches, over 100 yards, touchdown, 23 fantasy points. And he also ranks 13th among wide receivers in deep targets. And Harrison absolutely eats against single high, which Chicago runs at the 5th highest rate. Against single high, Marvin has earned 25% target share, 40% air yard share, 28% first read share, 2.92 yards per route run. Like, this guy's got to be in your starting lineup every single week. I would be riding the hot hand in week 9 against the Chicago Bears. Yes, it's a tougher matchup, but they haven't been as good in the secondary as of late. So make sure the talented rookie is in your lineup, and I think he puts together another big performance in week 9. At number 3, Terry McLaurin has scored double-digit fantasy points in 6 consecutive games, and he just torched the Chicago Bears in week 8. 5 catches, 125 yards, 17.5 fantasy points. Scary Terry is on his way to a career year, finally, with a competent quarterback under center. Jaden Daniels is playing phenomenal football, especially for a rookie, and McLaurin is cooking because of it, especially as of late, as he's averaged 18 fantasy points per game since week 3, along with sporting an impressive 25% target per route run rate this season. McLaurin has also been one of the best deep threats in football with 868 air yards, which is second in the NFL, 15.5 ADOT, which ranks 9th, along with 5 20-plus yard receptions, which ranks 10th. And the Giants have struggled as of late to defend the deep ball, which could mean Terry is just going to be in for another big game, as the Giants have allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game to perimeter receivers. So you can't bench him, right? He's must start at this point. I just think he stays hot and strings together another strong performance. At number 2, Evan Ingram is just pretty much the last man standing on this Jacksonville offense. Like, Christian Kirk out for the year. Brian Thomas Jr. questionable with that rib chest injury. The running backs are banged up. Travis Etienne hasn't played in a couple weeks. Tank Bigsby's banged up. There's no one else to really throw the football to at this point. Ingram could very well just drown in targets this week. And we saw this movie last year. When Kirk went down, Evan was absolutely dominant, as he was the tight end 3 in fantasy points per game, 25% target share when Kirk is not on the field. So he is going to go off. Even in a tough matchup against the Eagles, it just won't matter because of all the volume that he's likely going to see. And on top of that, the Jaguars are going to be playing from behind against a red-hot Eagles offense. That's a given at this point. So Lawrence is going to have to throw the football early and often, and Ingram is just probably going to have 10-plus targets in this one. And when a tight end sees 7 to 10 targets, that is must-start territory for the position. So I really like Ingram this week. Like I said, it's a tough matchup, but Jacksonville is going to have to be throwing early and often. And it's a pretty easy call to make that with all the injuries, that Ingram is going to be Lawrence's top target all afternoon. At number 1, Kirk Cousins. It doesn't matter where Kirk goes, what team he's on. All he does is ball, and is one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL right now. From the crazy amount of Coles cash that we know he has to the Kirko swag, he can really do it all. Another thing that he can do really well is torch the Tampa Bay Bucks. Week 5, 500-plus passing yards, 4 touchdowns. And then last week, 276 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, resulting in 28.6 fantasy points, and was the quarterback 3 on the week. Cousins started off the year slow, coming off that torn Achilles, but has really caught his stride as of late. 8th in yards per attempt, 5th in passing yards and passing touchdowns per game. And there's no reason to think that he can't put up strong numbers in week 9 against the Dallas Cowboys. That has not been a good defense all year. We just talked about Darnell Mooney. Of course, I like his quarterback because I think the Falcons are just going to score a ton of touchdowns in this one. And the Cowboys are also going to be down their best defensive player in Micah Parsons, who hasn't played for a couple of weeks. We talked about Trayvon Diggs likely going to miss as well. And Dallas has allowed the highest yards per attempt to quarterbacks. So I really like Cousins this week in a pretty easy matchup. I know that's kind of weird to say when talking about the Cowboys defense, but he needs to be in your lineup. He needs to be started. And I think he just puts up another monster day in week 9. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from the video, if you can please like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know. And I will see you in the next one.